The idea that COH2 could ever be a serious competitive game, 1v1 or something, is just a joke. And the fact that the balance team seems to always be trying to balance it around the idea that it should be is just laughable. And the reasons are twofold. The more minor reason is that it is, although only very mildly, pay to win. In the sense that if you don't buy all the bulletins and commanders, it is possible, depending on the balance of the game at that point in time, that your opponent, who has, may have something available that gives them victory that you, in an identical situation, would not. This was the case for a long time with commanders like elite troops or heavy cavalry, for instance. But the far more important reason is that the heavy and unpredictable use of RNG totally ruins any possibility of it. Now, I'm not against RNG, not at all. Without RNG, a game becomes solvable, like chess. It allows one to, hypothetically, perfectly predict the optimal course of action given their opponent's current disposition at all times, especially if you're some kind of savant. There's no dynamism to it. There's no excitement. But for the game to still be anywhere close to fair, since the outcome of a player's actions is no longer entirely of their own making, the RNG has to be limited in scope to the point it can be, shall we say, accounted for. The player can feel like they can utilize or compensate for the randomness to achieve better results. The best example would be an FPS shotgun. The pellet spread is usually wide and random, but this allows for quite a bit of leeway in hitting your target at close range, because it guarantees at least some of the pellets will probably hit even if you don't have the target dead center in your aim. Thus, the RNG incentivizes the player to use a weapon like that at close range and makes it more effective at close range, and therefore makes it have a specific gameplay function. In COH, this isn't the case. The chances that things will go wrong is much higher and cannot really be compensated for. For instance, a tank could lose a duel with an opposing tank simply because the RNG caused it to miss several shots while the opposing tank didn't. The player isn't at fault here, and they can't do anything to compensate for it. It's not like they control the tank directly, and there's even like a cone of fire that they can compensate for by adjusting the range. Like, you could call in an artillery strike, and it might hit all around that mortar team, but not actually kill it, so you just wasted a bunch of munitions. Or 3 shells could cluster right on top of it and obliterate the crew and the weapon and alter the match in your favor drastically. You have absolutely no way of knowing what's going to happen, right? You're just rolling a dice, you're flipping a coin. 2 squads could engage each other, and the damage done to one squad could be distributed such that it kills most of the members, while the damage to the other squad is more spread out, so all the models are heavily damaged, but none of them quite end up dead. So one player holds the field and loses no resources, while the other has to retreat and does. Now, you can try to compensate for this with cover usage and optimal engagement ranges, but ultimately you can't stop things like that from happening because how the models target and whether their shots land is not up to you, like at all. So you end up in situations where you're absolutely forced to roll the dice and leave your fate up to the game's random number generator. There's no way to engage a tank without submitting to both the accuracy RNG and the penetration RNG, for instance. And this leaves players whose tanks are not well protected in a bind. If you try to chase down a wounded panther, due to its armor, it's entirely possible your attempted kill shot could bounce right off, and then your tank ends up getting obliterated by his AT screen. It's a coin flip. Now, you could argue the safe bet is to just not do such a thing. But given how survivable tanks like the Panther are, if you don't take that kind of risk, that means that if your opponent is good, like they're not an idiot, they don't just leave damaged tanks sitting out there for you to kill, or they always, have an AT screen that they pull back behind to prevent you from doing stuff like that, then you won't ever kill any of his tanks without baiting them into traps that he may or may not fall for, which means they'll continue to gain XP until your units become incapable of dealing with them anymore. Now, by the same token, if you withdraw in good order from a fight, but your opponent goes YOLO and barrels his fucking tank, right through your lines, and despite the massive accuracy penalty when moving, RNGs a penetrating kill shot on your Vet 3 Tiger before being destroyed by your AT screen, that also feels like horseshit. Because normally you'd think that's a fucking stupid move that would get his tank destroyed for nothing. But there's always the possibility that it might work because the RNG allows it. The game always tempts you with the possibility that you might get great results if you just roll the dice. Now this kind of crazy shit does create fun moments, no doubt, don't misunderstand me, but not in a competitive environment. Which is why the game should not even attempt to have a pretext of being balanced or competitive. Just embrace the stupid. Embrace the random. Embrace the fun. There's a reason so many people love 4v4 expert comp stomps. It lets you just play around with the game's tools and blast away hordes of enemies without having to worry about whether or not it's balanced. In fact, it's better if it's not, because that lets the toys at your disposal be all they can be. I want a COH game where the doctrine you can pick totally changes your tech tree. Or if you pick armor, you get all the tanks and SPGs, and if you pick airborne, you get nothing but elite infantry and weapons teams. Is this balanced? No, it could never be balanced, but who cares? That's the kind of restriction in a casual environment that allows you to create your own fun with those tools. Now, COH 3 won't be that, of course. Hell, it refuses to even give up on this tired Americans and Brits versus Nazis shtick they've been doing for 15 years. But one can dream.